Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome to Signals and Standards with Suzie, the show where we decode mixed messages, raise the bar, and serve up real talk with a side of empowerment. I'm your host, Suzie, your go-to for truth bombs, clarity, and the kind of tough love that gets you unstuck and back in the driver's seat of your life. Together, let's turn those signals into action. Welcome to Signals and Standards with Suzie, the space where we talk truth about love, self-worth, and the art of showing up for yourself without apology. I'm your host, Suzie, your guide, your cheerleader, and your reminder that you can live your life boldly without breaking yourself in the process. Today's topic couldn't be more timely or more powerful, especially as we move into the season of togetherness, family, and often emotional overload. We're talking about setting boundaries without barriers or losing yourself. Let's be honest. In a world that constantly rewards overgiving, overworking, and over-explaining, setting boundaries can feel almost rebellious. Like you're breaking some unspoken rule that says your worth is measured by how much you tolerate. But here's the truth. Boundaries aren't rejection. They're self-respect in action. They're the quiet yet powerful declaration that says, I can care for you deeply, but not at the expense of myself. Boundaries are the invisible lines that protect your peace. They preserve your energy. They remind you that you are responsible for your own happiness and not anyone else's. They're not walls that keep love out or people out. They're filters that let the right kind of love in. And as we head into the holiday season where family expectations rise, social invitations pile up, and romantic relationships are tested by stress, comparison maybe. Why aren't you doing what this other person's doing? Why don't you have a family of your own? Why don't you date anybody? Why don't you have this job? Come on. We've all heard it, right? We even do it to ourselves. So our boundaries really, at this point, get stretched really thin. That's when self-awareness becomes your greatest superpower. So today, I want to explore how we can love freely, give generously, and show up fully without abandoning ourselves in the process. Because here's the thing. Boundaries don't block connections with others. They build them. Yeah, you heard it. They create a foundation, a good one built of honesty, safety, and you know what? Mutual respect too. The kind of relationships that feel peaceful, they feel authentic, they're real connections. So take a deep breath and stay with me because we're about to redefine what it truly means to love without losing yourself. Let's be real. The word boundaries can make people squirm. For some, it feels like confrontation. For others, it feels cold or maybe even controlling. But the truth is, boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about letting the right energy in. Think of your emotional space as a beautiful, thriving garden. The flowers are your joy, your peace, your purpose. Boundaries are the edges that protect that garden. Not to keep people out, but to make sure what grows inside is nurtured, that it's respected, and that nobody's trampling all over the garden. Without them, the weeds take over. Resentment, exhaustion, anxiety, these are all weeds. And suddenly what was once vibrant starts to wilt. That's precisely what happens when we live without boundaries. We overgive, we overextend, and overexplain until our self-worth starts to depend on how much we do for others rather than who we are. According to research from the Mental Health Center, the absence of healthy boundaries is directly linked to emotional burnout and heightened anxiety. When you don't know how to say no, your nervous system stays in a state of overdrive, constantly anticipating others' needs, fearing disapproval, or even trying to fix everything. Boundaries act like emotional shock absorbers. They soften the impact of life's demands so you can move through your days with a balance and peace. From an empowerment lens, boundaries are the ultimate act of self-care. They tell your mind and body, hey, I matter too. You don't need to justify your rest or your silence or your need for space. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're sustainable. They're what allow you to keep giving from a place of fullness instead of depletion. Psychologically speaking, boundaries are maps of self-awareness. They guide you to where you feel safe, where you feel valued, where you're more authentic. According to experts, clear boundaries help regulate our emotions, they build our self-esteem, and they really reduce stress from different relationships and interactions with others. So this is how you can do it. You want to protect your mental space because those boundaries, they keep you grounded rather than swept up in other people's storms, other people's drama. You stop absorbing those emotions as your own and respond instead of react. Also, you want to encourage respect. Boundaries really do encourage respect because every time you communicate your limits, you model how you deserve to be treated, how you want to be treated, and others need to take their cue from that. It also boosts your self-worth because every no is rooted in self-respect, and it's really a yes to your peace, right? It's a yes to your healing, to your growth, and that's so important. I often talk about the power of the pause, right? We talked about that before. That moment where you check in with yourself before saying yes to something that drains you. That pause is your internal boundary. It's saying don't abandon yourself for acceptance of others. And here's something people don't talk about enough. Those healthy boundaries, they're actually flexible. A boundary isn't like a stone wall that keeps people out. It evolves as you evolve. As psychologists explain, boundaries that bend instead of break allow you to stay open-hearted without losing your sense of self. Imagine like a strong tree. Its roots are deeply planted in the ground, right? That's your core values, your self-respect, your truth, your essence. But its branches, they may sway, they adapt to the seasons. That's flexibility. It's knowing when to lean in and when to pull back, when to compromise and when to stand firm. Boundaries shouldn't make your world smaller. It should help you grow within it. There's a fine line between that protection and isolation as well. Experts remind us that boundaries and barriers may look similar on the surface, but their roots are very different. Remember, good boundaries aren't a stone wall. Boundaries, they come from clarity. They're built on confidence. They're built on care. Barriers that come from fear. They're built on pain and self-protection. When we've been hurt, it's natural to want to retreat, to hide, to guard ourselves so tightly that no one can get close again. We build that wall, right? But those walls that keep the pain out also keep love and connection out. The healing lies in learning how to protect yourself without disconnecting from others. To build gates, not fortresses. So even the best boundaries, they can backfire if they come from the wrong place. If we're building that wall, remember? Psychologists highlight how overly rigid boundaries, they can really lead to loneliness or miscommunication. Sometimes in our effort to protect ourselves, we forget to let others in. Other times we set limits too vaguely and end up feeling walked over or even, misunderstood. That's why intention and communication are key. Boundaries should come from self awareness, they should not come from fear. They should sound like confidence, not control. Ask yourself, am I setting this boundary to stay safe or to stay distant? Does it reflect who I am now or who I was when I got hurt? The healthiest boundaries are those that honor both your individuality and your connection to others. Here's a little takeaway for you. Boundaries are actually love in action. Love for yourself and love for others. They create the emotional breathing room where respect, trust, intimacy can actually flourish. They're not about saying no to others. They're about saying yes to your peace, to your balance, and yes to your authenticity. And we want to be our most authentic selves, right? So as you move through the season of giving, remember, it's not selfish to protect your energy. It's actually sacred. Because when you set boundaries, you're not closing doors. You're building bridges strong enough to hold real, authentic love and connections with others. So take a moment with me now and take a deep breath. Give yourself this time. So no multitasking, no checking your phone, no replaying conversations in your head. I want you to picture one relationship in your life right now. Ask yourself slowly and without judgment. Am I protecting my beautiful garden or am I building a wall? When I say yes, is it from genuine desire to connect or do I feel obligated? Do I shrink so someone else can shine? Ask yourselves those questions. If you felt a twinge for any of those questions, that's your inner compass nudging you. Try this tiny check-in. Name one boundary you need. It could be emotional, it could be time, physical maybe, or even digital. Rate how clear it is from 1 to 10. Then pick one small step you can take this week to communicate it. It could be a sentence, a text, a pause, even a conversation. Small acts really do add up. They teach others how to love you, how to respect you, and they remind you that your peace, it's non-negotiable. Thank you for tuning in and sharing this space with me. Now, let's dive into one of my favorite parts of the show, your questions. Because let's be real, setting boundaries sounds simple in theory, but in real life, it can get messy. It can get really emotional and maybe even a little complicated. So let's unpack it together. And remember, if something's been tugging at your heart or you're facing a challenge of your own, I'd really love to hear from you. You can send your questions anytime at powercoachsuzie.com. Your question might inspire someone else's breakthrough. And I'm really grateful to everyone who's been sending them in. Let's get to our first question. I feel guilty when I say no to my family, especially during the holidays. How can I set boundaries without feeling selfish? Oh, that question touches the heart of something deeply human. That tug of war between love and self-preservation. The holidays for many come wrapped not only in ribbons and lights, but also in expectations, obligations, and, of course, guilt. We're conditioned to believe that love is proven through sacrifice, that being a good daughter, parent, sibling, son, brother, whatever, or even friend means saying yes to everyone and everything, even when it costs us our peace. But here's the truth that may take time to embrace fully. Boundaries are not acts of selfishness. They're acts of emotional maturity and self-respect. When we start breaking old patterns, that's when guilt can show up. It's like an internal alarm that goes off the first time you choose yourself. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something different and you feel bad for it. You're challenging the unspoken rule that love must come at your own expense. As the Mental Health Center explained, we talked about that earlier, setting boundaries helps prevent emotional burnout and anxiety, both of which often spike during high demand season like the holidays. Think of your emotional energy like a candle. When you burn at both ends to keep everyone else's world bright, your own flame eventually goes out. Boundaries allow you to keep your light steady so you can share it longer and stronger. Saying no when you're depleted isn't rejection, it's energy management. You can't pour from an empty cup, and trying to do so only leads to resentment, fatigue, and disconnection, which really isn't helpful. Here's a simple mindset shift. Boundaries are bridges, not walls. A wall says, keep out. A bridge says, here's how we can stay connected without crossing into chaos. You can express your needs with warmth and clarity, and that's okay. You could say something like, I love spending time with you, but I also need some downtime to recharge. That way, when I'm with you, I can be fully present. Let's find a time that works for all of us. That's not shutting people out. That's letting them in on your truth. When you communicate your needs with honesty and care, you're modeling emotional intelligence. And you're also modeling authenticity. You're being authentic and true to yourself. Over time, others learn to respect your boundaries because you've shown them how to respect themselves too. I read recently that boundaries are the language of respect, both for yourself and others. That's so impactful. And that's what this is all about. Mutual respect, not restriction. If guilt still lingers, try reframing it. Instead of asking, am I being selfish? Ask, am I being self-honoring? There's a big difference. Selfishness drains others to meet your needs. Self-honoring balances compassion for others with compassion for yourself. The next time that pang of guilt arrives, take a breath and remind yourself, this is growth in motion. Growth feels uncomfortable because it stretches you beyond the familiar. You're not pulling away from your family. You're actually redefining what love looks like in a healthier, more sustainable way. So let your no be an act of love for yourself, for the relationships you value, and those that value you. Because when you honor your limits, you're not only protecting your peace, you're teaching those around you that real connection doesn't require erasing yourself. It just involves honesty, balance, and of course, heart. Now for a second question. I've been in a codependent relationship for years. How do I begin setting boundaries without pushing my partner away? That's such an honest and powerful question, and one that so many people quietly wrestle with but rarely say out loud. Codependency can feel like being caught in a dance where you've been following your partner's steps for so long, you've forgotten what your own rhythm feels like. You move to their tempo, anticipate their needs above all else, and before you know it, you've lost touch with your own. So, first things first, recognizing that you're in a codependent dynamic isn't a weakness, it's the beginning of your freedom. So, congratulations on that. When you've spent years putting someone else's happiness ahead of your own, the idea of setting boundaries can feel almost dangerous and really scary. You might fear that if you stop giving so much, the relationship will crumble. But here's the truth. Love that depends on your self-abandonment isn't love. It's dependency. This is why, especially in my years as a dating coach, I always discourage statements like, I want to find my other half. Sure, that sounds romantic, but it's not. It's codependent and it can be very unhealthy. What I always encouraged was for each partner to be whole and healed on their own, to find each other, to build a healthy relationship and move forward on the same path, each as their own wonderful person. Healthy love like this allows space for two people to breathe, to grow, to evolve. Think of a relationship like a pair of trees growing side by side. If their branches tangle too tightly, neither can reach for the sun. But with space between them, still close, still connected, both trees grow taller, stronger, healthier even. That's what healthy boundaries do. They create breathing room for growth, not walls for distance. So, what to do? Start by tuning into yourself again. Ask, where do I feel drained? Where do I feel resentful? Where do I feel like I've lost my voice? Those moments are clues that your boundaries have been crossed, or perhaps never established in the first place. Begin small and intentional. Maybe it's setting aside one evening a week for yourself, to rest, to read, or just be. Perhaps it's learning to pause before saying yes to every request. As psychologists note, self-care and boundaries go hand in hand. It's about preserving your emotional energy so you can give from a place of abundance, not a place of depletion. When you're ready to communicate your boundaries, you want to lead with compassion and clarity. Use I statements that focus on your needs and feelings rather than what your partner is doing wrong. You may say something like, I love being close to you, but I've realized I need more time to focus on my personal goals. I want to bring my best self to this relationship. And to do that, I need space to recharge. This kind of language invites us to understand rather than being defensive. It says, I still care deeply, but I also care about myself. It's a me statement that expresses how I feel and what I need, not a critical, accusatory you statement that blames them. Here's the part that many people don't talk about. Setting new boundaries in a codependent relationship often feels really uncomfortable at first. You may experience guilt, anxiety, or even some pushback. Your partner might not understand right away, especially if they've grown accustomed to you always being available. But that discomfort isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're growing. As experts highlight, boundaries are often followed by short-term tension before long-term harmony. It's like realigning a bone that's been out of place. It's painful at first, but it's necessary for healing. And remember, boundaries are not ultimatums, they're invitations. You're inviting your partner to meet you in a healthier, more balanced space. Sometimes they'll rise to it and sometimes they won't. But either way, you'll be standing on solid ground, rooted in your own truth and authenticity. If you're struggling to navigate this shift, therapy can be a tremendous support. Codependent patterns often come from old wounds like childhood conditioning, a fear of abandonment, or even a belief that your worth is tied to what you do for others. A therapist can help you unpack that story and build new emotional habits that support your independence and self-worth. Here's something I've learned from my own personal and coaching experience. Reclaiming yourself in love doesn't mean rejecting your partner. It means learning how to give without losing. When you begin honoring your own boundaries, you're not pushing your partner away. You're modeling what healthy love looks like. You're teaching them that connection thrives not through constant proximity, but through mutual respect and individuality. So take that first step. Even if your voice shakes, it might be as small as saying no when you mean it, or as bold as taking a weekend for yourself without guilt. With every boundary you set, you send a message to yourself and to the world. I am worthy of love that doesn't require me to disappear. Because in the end, boundaries don't break relationships. They clarify them. And the right people will meet you there, not because you've demanded it, but because they respect your strength. And here's our third and final question. Every time I try to set a boundary, people call me difficult or say I've changed. How do I stay strong without feeling misunderstood? Oh, I love this question because it speaks to the heart of what so many of us experience when we finally start choosing ourselves. When you've spent years being the easy one, the go-to, the yes person, that people get comfortable with that version of you. They build their comfort around your compliance. So when you begin to change that rhythm, when you finally start saying no, when you start taking space or prioritizing your peace, it can feel to them like the music stopped. But here's the truth. It didn't stop. You just started playing your own song. Setting boundaries often reveals who was benefiting from your lack of them as well. And that can be jarring, both for you and the people around you. You might hear things like, "You've changed," or "You're being selfish." But let's reframe that for a second. Maybe you have changed. And perhaps that's precisely what growth is supposed to look like. Remember that setting boundaries isn't about creating conflict. It's about creating emotional balance. And balance often disrupts what was previously off kilter. When someone calls you difficult for having boundaries, it's often because your limits challenge their own comfort zone. You've stopped pouring from your empty cup and they're not sure how to adjust. But think of it this way. If your life were a house, boundaries are the front door. You get to decide who enters, how long they stay, and what behavior is welcome. Leaving your door wide open for everyone to walk through, it's not kindness, it's chaos. It's normal to feel misunderstood in this process. Growth, it really often happens in solitude. Remember, you're retraining not only others, but you're retraining yourself too. You're teaching your nervous system that safety doesn't come from pleasing, but from peace. Boundaries are a vital part of self-respect, yet many of us were conditioned to equate boundaries with rejection. That's why they can feel like armor at first, but over time they start to think like alignment. Here's something I tell my clients. When you start setting boundaries, your circle might shrink, but your peace expands. And that's a trade worth making every single time. You don't owe anyone access to your energy just because they've had it before. Relationships are meant to evolve, and the ones built on mutual respect will adapt to this new you. The ones that resist, your overgiving, not genuine balance, likely sustain those relationships. And yes, it's uncomfortable. You might second guess yourself. Maybe you'll replay these conversations in your head. But here's a reframe. Every time you hold a boundary, you're rewriting the story of your worth. You're reminding yourself that you don't have to overextend to be loved. It's like when a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. During metamorphosis, everything familiar dissolves. The old form literally breaks down. It's messy, isolating, and confusing. But on the other side of that transformation is freedom, wings, space, perspective. That's what happens when you evolve through boundaries. The people who genuinely love you will learn to love your wings, not your cage. So when someone tells you, "You've changed," smile and say, "You're right. I've grown." Because boundaries aren't about being difficult. They're about being deliberate. They're how you protect your peace, honor your worth, and ensure that love, both given and received, flows from a place of mutual respect, not obligation. You're not being hard to love. You're learning to love yourself enough to accept that no longer what hurts. And that's empowering. Take a moment to pause and really reflect on this. Where in your life have you been saying yes when you really meant no? Where have you been bending, shrinking, or stretching yourself to fit someone else's expectations at the cost of your own peace and energy? Boundaries aren't walls meant to shut people out. They're bridges that guide others toward authentic connection. They create space for honesty, respect, and also for mutual understanding. When you honor your limits, you're not pushing love away. You're making room for relationships that celebrate the real you, not just the version that sacrifices for other people's approval. It's a powerful reminder that the healthiest connections grow from truth and not obligation. Thank you for staying with me. Now I want to share a coaching moment that perfectly illustrates boundaries in action and the power of reclaiming your autonomy. When my client first came to me, they were drowning in the expectations of others, especially their partner. They were exhausted, overwhelmed, and carried a quiet resentment that kept building over time. And every time they put someone else's needs above their own. They would often say yes to requests that drained them, avoid expressing their true feelings to keep the peace, and they felt guilty for wanting their own space. Is that familiar to everyone? We started by unpacking their core values, what really mattered to them, what they would and would not compromise on. Then we explored their emotional triggers, the moments they felt compelled to overgive, the situations that made them feel invisible, and the subtle ways they had internalized the belief that their needs came second. Here's where the magic began. We started practicing small, achievable boundaries. At first, it was tiny things. Taking a quiet hour for themselves after work, saying no to a social event that felt draining, or voicing their opinion when it differed from their partner's. One breakthrough moment was simple, yet transformative. They looked at me and said, "I need time for myself, and that's okay." Wow. Just saying those words out loud, without guilt, without apology, was like watching a butterfly emerge from its cocoon. Over time, their self-esteem grew, and so did the balance of their relationships. Their partner began to respect their limits, and the dynamic shifted from codependence to mutual respect. They also pursued therapy to work through deeper patterns, which gave them even more clarity and confidence. Their journey reminds us that boundaries aren't about punishing others. They're about protecting your energy and reclaiming your voice. My client's story mirrors a journey of my own in profound ways. For years, I struggled to set boundaries, terrified of conflict or the possibility of rejection. I thought that keeping peace meant keeping friendships and love, but the opposite was true. By failing to honor my own limits, I was teaching others how to treat me and moving away from my own values, my core values, often in ways that left me drained and resentful. It's only when I decided enough was enough that I started saying no to requests that didn't align with my values and began articulating my needs with clarity, but also compassion. At first, I'll be honest, I felt really uncomfortable and it was really scary. But the more I practiced, the more I realized something beautiful. The people who truly cared about me didn't pull away. They adapted. They respected my space, and our relationships deepened in ways they had never had before. Boundaries, I learned, are not about creating barriers. They're about creating a space where relationships with others can flourish. And that is a beautiful thing. They're your declaration of autonomy, your commitment to yourself, and your guide to relationships that honor both you and the other person. When you stand in your truth, when you protect your energy and say what you need to say, you don't just survive, you thrive. My client's journey and mine remind us that boundaries are acts of courage. They're the bridge between self-respect and connection. And the best part, every small boundary you set today builds the foundation for the empowered, authentic, and fulfilled life you deserve. Take a moment to pause and check in with yourself. Think about your own relationships, at home, at work, with friends. Where have you been giving more than you're receiving? Where have you stayed silent when your needs deserve to be heard? Ask yourself, which boundaries have I been avoiding out of fear, guilt, or even the worry of being misunderstood? What is one small boundary that I can set this week that protects my energy and honors my truth? How might my relationships shift if I show up fully rather than overextending myself to please others? Remember, every boundary is a statement of self-respect. It's not rejection. You're not rejecting others. You're standing up for yourself. And each time you honor yourself, you teach others how to love and respect you. And you step closer to the authentic, empowered life you deserve. Hold that reflection with intention as we wrap up for the day and talk about some final takeaways. As we wrap up today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect on everything that we've explored. Boundaries aren't about pushing people away or even building walls. They're about creating safe, sacred spaces where love can flow freely without compromising who you are. They are the bridges that allow relationships to grow authentically, the anchors that keep your emotional energy intact, and the guideposts that teach others how to honor and respect you. We start by understanding that boundaries are acts of self-respect and not rejection. Like a well-tended garden, they protect your peace and allow your relationships to flourish without overgrowth or chaos. We explored how flexible boundaries communicated with clarity and compassion invite connection rather than isolation, and how poorly defined boundaries can backfire if left vague or rigid. Through our Q&As, we saw real-life applications, saying no without guilt, reclaiming your voice in codependent dynamics, and standing firm when others resist your limits. Each story emphasized a core truth. Boundaries are not barriers to love. They're the pathway to healthier, more balanced, and more fulfilling relationships. We also saw that in our coaching moment. We witnessed a transformation in action. By identifying needs, practicing small boundaries, and seeking support, my client reclaimed their autonomy and strengthened their connection with their partner. Their journey mirrors my own experience, as I spoke about, learning the hard way that authentic relationships and respect begin with honoring ourselves first. Remember this. Setting boundaries is an act of courage, not selfishness. Every boundary you honor is a declaration of your worth, a teaching moment for others, and a step toward the authentic life and relationships that you deserve. So here's your big takeaway. Love deeply, connect meaningfully, protect your peace, stand firm in your truth, communicate your needs clearly, and remember, the healthiest relationships grow from respect and authenticity, and there has to be balance, not self-sacrifice. Boundaries are your bridge, your anchor, your shield. They allow love to thrive without losing yourself. Here's our affirmation to end the day. Repeat after me, slowly and with intention. I am worthy of love and respect. Not just sometimes, not just when I'm convenient or pleasing. I'm inherently worthy simply because I exist. I honor my needs and set boundaries with confidence because I recognize that protecting my energy and speaking my truth is not selfish. It's an act of courage and self-respect. I create space for healthy, balanced relationships. I attract connections that uplift, support, and celebrate me, while letting go of those that drain or diminish me. Again, I'm worthy of love and respect. I honor my needs and set boundaries with confidence. I create space for healthy, balanced relationships. I am worthy of love and respect. I honor my needs and set boundaries with confidence. I create space for healthy, balanced relationships. Say these affirmations, letting each word sink deeply into your mind, body, and heart. Feel the strength of your own worth, the power of your boundaries, and the clarity in your connections. Thank you for being here and stepping into your power with me today. I look forward to seeing you next week for another empowering conversation. Remember, you can catch these episodes anytime on my podcast, Signals and Standards with Suzie, available on all your favorite listening platforms. See you next time. For daily inspiration and practical advice, find me on social media at Power Coach Suzie. Got questions or ideas for the show? Head to powercoachsuzie.com where you can connect with me, explore the blog, or learn more about what I do. This is Suzie signing off. Until next time, keep reading the signals and never, ever lower your standards.